Hi everyone, it's John from What Up and welcome back to another video. Now, tonight we're going to talk about some Wheel of Time news that have happened over the last couple of weeks. Now, even though the production has finished Season 1 and we have no more Wheel of Time episodes to watch, there is still news coming out about Season 2 and beyond. So I'll probably do a news video, say once a week. That way I can take all the relevant articles from the past week, bring them all together and talk about them. Now, there are a ton of them that come out every single day, although most of them seem to be duplicates of one another. So I'll try to pick the most relevant ones and talk about those at least once a week. Now, of course, if something special or big or breaking comes out, I'll cover that in a separate video, but for now, once a week for news is probably going to be just enough. Now, if you're new to the channel and you don't know what I do here, I cover Wheel of Time show news. So anything and everything to do with Sony and Amazon's production, well, that's what I talk about here. So if you like Wheel of Time content, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell because I put out a ton of it here. Now, before we get into the video, I do want to give a spoiler warning. So, spoiler warning, in this video we're going to talk about certain elements of Season 2 of Sony and Amazon's Wheel of Time show. Now, we're not going to spoil anything that happens there, nor are we going to spoil anything that happens in Season 1, but be forewarned, if some of my predictions or guesses that happen by talking about these articles happens to come true, well, it may ruin your viewing pleasure. Alright, all of that being said, let's get on to the video. Alright, so before we start the video, I just want to say one thing. There are three types of Wheel of Time fans for the show. There are the fans that truly love the show and can see no wrong with it at all. There are absolutely no criticisms that are completely valid with the show with these people. There are the type of fans that hate the show. They absolutely don't like anything that happened. They hate the show completely. They think the books are best, and they don't enjoy even the most enjoyable aspects of the show. They just hate it. And then the majority of the fans sit somewhere in the middle. There are aspects they like and aspects they don't like. I sit somewhere in the middle. So I just want to let you folks know that I do see your comments on my videos. There are a lot of people that, when I make a criticism of the show, are very upset that I am. And there are a lot of people that, when I say nice things about the show, they're very upset that I am. Letting you folks know my stance will never change. I'm in the middle, and I call it as I see it. If something happens that I don't like or don't enjoy, I'm going to mention it. If something happens that I do like and I do enjoy, I'm going to mention that too. I try to be fair and honest, and no, I'm not in Amazon or Sony's pocket, and I will actually tell you that they did come right out and tell me that I will never get anything official from them specifically. So, you don't have to worry about them buying me off. That's not a thing. It's not going to happen. Alright, so the first article we're going to talk about here are Nielsen ratings. Now, if you don't know what a Nielsen rating is, it's a rating that happens specifically and solely in the US. So, this article is skewed a little bit, and the title of it is a little clickbaity, but it does have some good information, so we're going to talk about it. Essentially what it does is it compares ratings for this show with a bunch of other shows in the US. Now, I've left a link to this article down below in the description box if you folks want to take a look at it and read it in its entirety, but I'm going to give you the Cole's notes of it here and tell you the most important bits. Essentially, the very first week that the Wheel of Time was out, it had just over 19 million hours watched, which is phenomenal. That's crazy good, although it's for 3 episodes. So you can basically say, and the article says this, that it's 6.46 million hours watched per each episode, which is probably mostly correct. I mean, some people may have watched the first episode a couple of times and then never watched 2 or 3. Some people may have watched all 3. You might have watched 3 2 or 3 times, but probably by and by the average is 6.46 million hours watched per episode. The second week when it came out, would be the new episode 4. Now, what they included in this was all of the hours watched for episodes 1, 2, 3, and the new episode 4, and that was 11.05 hours. So that's a lot of hours watched, a lot of millions of hours watched across the US. So it's hard to say exactly what percentage of that 11 million is just for the 4th episode, but it's probably somewhere in line with what happened for the first 3. And then the whole core and argument of this article is that as the weeks went on, less and less people watched it. So week 4 was 8.95, or week 3 rather was 8.95 million, week 4 is 8.5, and so on and so forth. Now, they ended up comparing this to a bunch of other shows, and the only show that Wheel of Time didn't beat in the US was Red Notice, and that's a movie that came out on Netflix with The Rock, Ryan Reynolds, and it was a big smash hit, like huge hit, but it was a movie, so it's kind of like comparing apples to oranges. But what I can say, and what this article doesn't state, is that this was Amazon Prime's biggest release of the year. It was number 1 when it came out. It was number 1 right up until the finale. Episode 8 aired on Christmas Eve, and it was only just recently, within the last week or so, that it dropped to number 2 on Amazon Prime streaming services. So it was the most watched Amazon Prime show for sure, and it's in the top 5 of all time. So it was a big hit. Now, in a couple of other videos, I said that the show was a smash hit, and people grumbled and complained and said, well, how much are they paying you to say that? They're not. It really was a massive hit, because this is just the US. The biggest following for the show comes out of India. And I couldn't tell you how many millions of hours watched are coming out of India. I have no idea. I don't have that information. So if any of you folks do, leave it in the comments down below. But across the globe, this show was absolutely massive. Like it, dislike it, love it, hate it, it doesn't matter. It was a really big hit. And again, this article basically just stated that as time went on, less and less people watched it, which is 100% true for almost any show. You have a bunch of people tuning in for the premiere, probably more than anyone else to watch the first episode. And I know personally a ton of people that watched the first episode went, no, this show is not for me. And they were fans of the books and people who haven't read the books before. I knew other people that stopped watching after episode 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. I know a lot of people picked it back up for episode 7 because the cold open was absolutely amazing. And then a lot of people watched episode 8 and then vowed they never watched the show again. And other people watched it and absolutely loved it and then rewatched the series 2 or 3 times. So it's normal for viewership to drop off week by week, especially if you're releasing a bunch of episodes initially and then one after that, because people either will like what they're seeing and continue, or they'll stop at any given time. But either way, you can't argue that it was a massive success. Alright, so the next article we're going to talk about is from Nerdist. If you don't know who or what Nerdist is, they are an online publication that deals in all nerdy things. And I've left a link to this particular article down below in the description box. It's a good read, and Amy Radcliffe is a fantastic writer and a really great interviewer. She has done a bunch of Wheel of Time interviews with cast, with crew, with production, and you've probably seen her either on Twitter or on Instagram, because she basically uses Twitter a lot to talk about Wheel of Time and other things. Now, this particular article talks about the sound, so how the sound designers work with Wheel of Time. And it was a really interesting read, and if you want to read it when you're done the video, I would recommend it if you're into this sort of thing. But basically it stated that they wanted the very first episode to have very familiar sounds, to make people comfortable, familiar fantasy sounds, familiar sounds that you would recognize from your daily life. So Emond's Field, the Two Rivers, a lot of that was real nature sounds, very little changing it up, so to speak. Although they did change everything just a little bit, because it's not exactly where we live. It's not Earth. It's something a little bit different. It's a far future apocalyptic setting. Now, they also changed the sounds based on where they were at. So Shader Logoth was very creepy, very quiet and ominous. The Tower was very quiet and formal. When the Amerlin spoke, they kind of changed her voice just a little bit to make it sound like she was speaking out of a PA system, just a smidge, but not really noticeable unless you really stop and listen for it. All of these things combined together made for some really, really smart sound choices for the show, and it's one of the things that I really enjoyed about it. Now, something that I didn't notice on my 5 or 6 watches of the entire series was that when the Ta'veren affect the pattern, there's a sound in the background. I didn't get that. Now, I know I heard Thane whistling and I heard a bunch of other more obvious things, but in episode 3, when Matt and Rand were at the farm, there is a specific sound in the background when it appears that Rand is affecting the pattern as a Ta'veren. That's mentioned in this article, and it's something really neat that I didn't know about, that I'm going to go back my next watch through and try to pick up on that, because I'm sure there's other instances of it in the show. Now, the last thing they talked about was how they did the sounds for the Fades and the Trollocs. Now, the Fades, they say, were women's screams coupled with a lot of birds of prey, and that's what they went for. And Trollocs were more based around dogs and more guttural sounds, which was very neat. And, of course, sound and music can make or break a production. It could be the most beautiful thing, well-acted, well-thought-out production ever. If the sound is terrible or the music is terrible, it just doesn't play right, because that can really, really foster emotion in the viewers. And I think they did a fantastic job with this one. Anyway, really great read, and the biggest takeaway from this is that I learned that they had Ta'veren sounds in there. Alright, so the next article we're going to talk about come from our friends over at WattSeries.com. If you don't know who WattSeries are, they are a fantastic resource for Wheel of Time news. They come out with all kinds of great stuff. They have all kinds of official things they get interviews, they come out with leaks, and they come out with all kinds of little tidbits that nobody else has, and they're always correct. So if you don't know who they are, the link to this article is in the description box down below. Make sure, if you don't read any of their articles, read this one and bookmark their site and go back there. They're absolutely fantastic people that I am lucky to call friends. Now, this particular article is about Kieran Donnelly. He is the director for episodes 7 and 8, and they got to sit down with him and ask him a bunch of questions. One of the things that I found really interesting about this is they asked how he initially got involved in the Wheel of Time. He said that he sat down and got a call from Mike Weber, one of the executive producers in the show, and asked who's interested. He then met with Rafe, read the scripts, and he realized at that point that Amazon and Sony were very committed to the series. They're committed with money, with time, with doing it right, and that's when he picked up and he said he really wanted to take over and do this. He was asked what his favorite scene was, and of course, like everyone else that I've ever spoken to, he said the blood snow. So he did direct it, so I'm sure Kieran is a little bit biased there, but blood snow was my very first time during the Wheel of Time where I kind of picked my jaw off the floor. I mean, I like the series as a whole, but that was the standout scene of the entire first season for me and for a lot of other folks I've spoken with. Now, the last thing he was asked about, and he was very careful in his answers for this, which I'm not surprised at, were the problems they had with Episode 8. Now, we do know that when Episode 8 and in some aspects Episode 7 were filmed, there were a ton of problems. So you had Barney Harris exiting the production after Episode 6. You had COVID limiting the amount of people on set. So they couldn't have the big battle scenes they wanted. They had to use more CG for the Trollocs, more CG for the battles. They lost their location for filming the Blight, and they had to build the Blight rather than using a location in which we believe was the Canary Islands. There's a lot of other things that happened there. They talked about those challenges and how they overcame them, and that his main goal in directing Episodes 7 and 8 were for the viewers to never really know that there were any challenges just by watching the show. So they watched it. He didn't want them to see problems. He just wanted them to see and enjoy the episodes, which was pretty neat. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about today is this. This was picked up by Gaijin1973 on Twitter. So, of course, I say this a lot, but if you folks don't have Twitter, please go get Twitter. I mean, a lot of people don't like it. They don't use it. They don't enjoy it. It's not a young person's social media app, from what I've been told, because I'm a little bit older. But there is something called Twitter of Time on there. And there is a ton of Wheel of Time stuff that comes on there. There's a lot of character accounts, a lot of people that talk about it, and there are a lot of information dropped from Sony, from Amazon, and from other fans just in general about this. Now, there was an article by the Press Journal, and this gentleman was featured in it. Now, Stuart Moore, he released a graphic novel recently, but he's also an actor once in a while. And in this particular article, he released a small little tidbit, and that tidbit was that he was in Season 2 of The Wheel of Time. He's going to show up in Season 2, Episode 5, and during his scenes he was riding a horse through a Czech forest. Now, he had done other acting on Narnia and different things like that where he learned horseback riding, and because he was well versed in horseback riding, he actually got a call from his agent saying, hey, do you want to show up for Wheel of Time and film for a couple of days? And he did. Now, I've reached out to Stuart myself. We've had a little bit of chat here and there, and he's given me a little bit of information just in very general terms about the production. I'll feature that in another video at another day. Of course, he can't talk about his role or can't talk about anything specific. That's all under NDA. But, you know, things like COVID protocols, things like that, he's going to let us know what's going on with that. So, all we know about his character is that he's showing up in Season 2, Episode 5. He's on horseback, riding through the forest, and he got that gig because he was good at horseback riding. And that's all we know. So, we haven't had a whole lot of information about Season 2 so far, but we know they just finished filming pretty much right up till Episode 7. So I believe January, February of this year, they're filming 7 and 8. We have no idea what's going to happen there. We don't have much information on it, but I am doing my best to dig. So here's a call out to you folks. So anyone watching the channel, or if you know of anyone that works in the industry, if they know anything about the Wheel of Time whatsoever, about Season 2, Season 3, Writer's Room, castings, rumors, anything at all, let me know about it. My DMs are open on Instagram, and they're open on Twitter. Both my handles are down below in the description box. I also have an email address that's in the description of my channel, so if you click over to community, excuse me, losing my voice, I am a little under the weather. I do have an email address there where you can send me information, and as long as I can vet the information and prove that it's true, I will feature it here on the channel and give you folks a shout out for that as well. Now, I want to thank you all so very, very much for sticking with me here to the very end of this video. And again, like I said, I'm going to do a news video at least once a week. Unless something big comes out, then maybe 2 or 3 times. We don't know. I suspect that we're going to see more and more leaks and more news about Season 2 with the production starting to wind down now. So, thank you so very much for sticking with me here to the very end. Here's to many more.